YouTube, how the duck doing? Duck Films here, Deadlock Team Analyst for Rose Syndicate. And what I have for you today is a new updated tier list. Now, something to know is that I typically don't make 2 tier lists in the same month. I generally only do one or if there's some significant major patch. However, there was a recent small patch or a minor patch that was, in my opinion, rather significant to the meta, because it pulled some of the characters that were super strong down a notch, meaning other characters can now shine. This is why you see characters like Celeste truly shining now. Now, like always, I'm going to be talking through why I'm putting certain characters in certain places and trying to give you the full analytic and reasons why you might see some of these characters so strong now. But regardless, if you're randomly stumbled onto this channel, then I highly encourage you, if you need any Deadlock educational content, whether it's lightning phase, macro, micro, whatever the case may be, then definitely check out the channel. I have a ton of videos pretty much for everybody. Or if you like what you see, do me a favor, at least hit that like button. It greatly helps me out. But that's besides that, let's dive straight in. Now, because this is like a updated tier list video, the video isn't going to be as long, but right now I put up my old tier list. And you can see there's some characters in a way lower position than you might have thought were way higher because of the recent changes with Celeste making us being so powerful now. You can see towards the beginning of the month where the power ranking of characters generally were at. You see characters like Infernus being super high up. You see the McGinnis character being relatively low in the more neutral spot. You see Celeste being really, really low. You also see Billy. You also see Mirage Pocket being S tier. You see Geist, Calico, Venator all being really high proud, along with a character like Holiday and Lash. You see Viscous, you see Abrams being in the relatively middle, and you see Drifter notched down a couple of pegs. But I think talking about some of the big changes is rather important, so that's what we're going to be covering in today's video. And I think this tier list is mainly changing, or my personal tier list is mainly changing because of this patch here, the minor update on the 12th, where they changed some stuff with Apollo. They nerfed Billy and changed his Rising Ram tier 3. They also slightly nerfed his Spirit Scaling on his Chain Gang. They slightly nerfed Doorman. Not that it really mattered in any regard. I think a lot of people commented on my other tier list saying I was saying that Doorman was extremely strong because of his door. And I don't think people really grasped why, in a sense. It's not like, yes, it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick character. And people complain about the kidnap and everything, and I said that the door needed to be nerfed, but people were arguing against that. I just want to put into the reasoning why the Doorman door is so strong. So when you think about different types of level of play, you know, you have your more casual, you have your more competitive, and then of course you have your pro scene in quotations. The big thing is Doorman. Doorman's door allows essentially 6 coordinated people to run through the door, capitalize on a kill inside of an enemy's like deep in their jungle, and get out of the door, close the door, you get your pick, and you're already at a 6v5 advantage. That is the reason why Doorman is so strong. Usually in coordinated play, the impact of this character is so significant. That's why you see in Night Shift and other tournaments, Doorman consistently banned because he has the option and allowance to be able to make that split decision play, get the pick, you know, set up a play, set up a pick, do mid boss, get out of the base. You know, it has all of these options and routes you can do with this character. This is why Doorman is so significantly strong, is because of the door mechanic. Now, I said that the door needed to be nerfed because of that essentially, you know, coordinated play mechanic. Maybe more casual play, more, you know, I guess, competitive play, not necessarily pro or the high levels. You don't see that coordination, so the impact isn't necessarily as felt. But once you start getting it into matches that have some sort of level of coordinates or, you know, being able to operate together, that impact is significant and it's really hard to counter. There's only a couple characters that can actually counter this playstyle, and those characters aren't necessarily good right now. For example, you have a character like Graves. Hold on. You have a character like Graves who, if the Doorman puts a door, you just put your line ability, the Graves Stun, in front of the door so everyone running through it or running out of it is instantly stunned and hit by ghouls. That is the concept of the Graves counter of Doorman. But generally speaking, Doorman is a character that is just fundamentally, when you have anything like Teleport, and I'm going to bring up the forbidden word of Marvel Rivals and Overwatch for examples, because in Overwatch 1, I've never played Overwatch 2 because I refuse to play it, but in Overwatch 1, you had a character named Symmetra who had a TP. Basically, Symmetra allowed her entire team to TP and do the same thing as Doorman. And later on, they eventually nerfed Symmetra, so she doesn't necessarily have that full capacity of what she used to be able to do, although there's still some remnants of it. And then in Marvel Rivals, for example, you have Doctor Strange, who has a teleport ability, who can teleport an entire team from spawn to a point. This is why, in my opinion, TP characters are a little bit gimmicky because of the agency and just tempo those characters can create around the map by having your entire team coordinated. But this is where it changes. The coordination versus non-coordinated team play. Non-coordinated, it doesn't get too much value, but in coordinated play, it gets a lot more value. That is the idea about Doorman and why he's so strong, because people, were hating on that I said he needed to be nerfed. Even though a lot of these nerfs they do to him doesn't really change fundamentally why he's so strong, because of his door. Because they can nerf all of his gun damage, they can nerf his spirit scaling, they can nerf all of that, but because of his door, in my opinion, he will never be truly nerfed because of the impact the door has. Some other changes were things like Drifter. I don't think the changes to Drifter were too impactful. You still build him spirit. The 1.7 to 1.4 doesn't change how strong Rend is with a full-on silence, so that's whatever. Holiday, the powder keg now does half its damage immediately in over 3 seconds as a damage over time. The thing is, it doesn't change the amount of damage she does entirely. It doesn't change the damage from what it was before till now. It still does the full damage. So that's not anything. The big thing is with McGinnis. So back when I made this tier list, McGinnis wasn't strong at all yet. Then, a couple days after, they did a buff to her. And then a couple days after that, they did the nerf to her. But basically, McGinnis is still really strong, even if you're building Bullet. When you look at Bullet damage base and growth values were reduced by 5%, that kind of looks like a lot, but inherently this is only a nerf to McGinnis's Bullet, her gun damage by 5%. You build items that counteract this 5% penalty, so it doesn't really matter. Some pretty big things are the things with her Medicinal Spectre. Again, not anything really big. I will say the tier 1 plus 40% spirit res to 1.5 second duration is pretty massive, but instead you would just, max Medicinal Spectre and that's whatever. You have some changes to Page, which I think these changes are actually pretty nice with the plot armor weapon changes. You have things like Seven, Vindicta, Viper, Wraith. The big thing is Billy, Doorman, and McGinnis. Some of these characters, because they're getting buffed or nerfed, inherently make their counterparts like other characters shine a lot more. So let's go ahead and look at that. So when we come back to my original tier list, there's a couple things. And that was with McGinnis. I think McGinnis is now a S character from originally what she was, and probably towards the top of it. Even though these buffs or these nerfs didn't, they say they did something, they didn't inherently do anything to the character, I guess, fundamentally, because she's so impactful regardless if she sits in a sideline. It's more about the agency this character has, what she's able to do around the map. Basically, she wins her lane extremely fast, she gets the Guardian, and then she rotates from her lane to another lane, gets the other Guardian, and then rotates to the last lane and gets the Guardian as well. Basically, just opening up the entire map for the entire team to farm. This is why one of the big key parts of McGinnis being so strong is that she allows her team to scale extremely well and extremely fast because she opens up the map so well. And you can see in Night Shift in the pick rates how picked this character is now. Especially with the, the original changes, which she was super strong, but even later on, she's still really good. Yes, she is a little bit chunky. She is, I think, I forget the term they use for being how slow. It'll eventually come back to me, but she is still in a relatively good spot. So she's going to easily be sitting towards the S tier. Yes, I have Night Shift on the side of my screen. That's besides the point. You can see that she still is sitting, S tier, at least right now, for the updated tier list of mine. I think another character that is brought up is that you can see towards the bottom, you have Celeste in a D tier. So a big thing about Celeste's rise in popularity is Celeste struggled to get a lot of value because you saw Billy being played 24/7, and Billy, and as well as a character like Yamato, were extremely good counters to Celeste. Yamato, because of her grapples respectively, but the grapples were slightly nerfed, so she has to use Recharging Rush now and proc it, but if you're playing Celeste, it's really hard for her to, to land the shots consistently to be able to get an extra grapple. So the character essentially rises through the ranks because people understand why she's so strong. Some other major important things, I've always said that this character is extremely strong for the movement and because of they literally just keep giving her buffs, and I haven't seen any nerfs since the character got fully released. So when the character was fully released for the very first time, after, you know, the 6 hero update with Graves and everything else, the only thing they did was they did a slight nerf when she was first out. Because if you remember, she was completely broken, or, you know, if you weren't here when she was first out, she was completely broken. She does an insane amount of damage, even more so than what she does now, and it was just infinitely better, infinitely more scaling, all of that. Then they did a pretty decent nerf to her, just like with Apollo and all the other, you know, characters that were new. But since then, they've been slowly buffing her back up. And when we go all the way back to the 28th of July, the big thing is Celeste Shiny Wonder radius increased from 16.5 to 17.5, and you see Shiny Wonder damage increased by 10%, as well as the Shiny Wonder buffer duration increased from 3 seconds to 3.25, meaning you can lean a lot more Spirit now and just play for your ultimates. This is why you run things like Witchmail and a lot of the health regen items, as well as Radiant Regen and all of the other, you know, shielding abilities, because it allows you to proc it a lot more consistently and being able to have a ton of uptime. Another big item was Restorative Locket, getting back into the item pool being a super strong item. Inherently, a character like Celeste, who has a lot of movement, uses stamina, likes Restorative Locket because it refills her stamina and gives her a lot of HP. Basically, all these, in turn, with changes to Spirit Burn, just make her a lot stronger now. So that is the big thing, that all of these changes are inherently buffing Celeste, and it kept maintaining this for quite a while. But who knows, by the time this video gets released, the character might be nerfed, but who knows. So essentially, this character goes from being essentially categorized in the D tier all the way moved up to S. And if you find yourself struggling against a character like Celeste and she has to hold this health regen, there's a couple things to note. The best items to buy are Toxic Bullets, anti-heal items, as well as buying Decay. Decay is very good. So she essentially moves up to the S tier because of how strong she is. And I think I'm actually going to add a row above and name this like Outlier, or I guess like S+. I hate putting multiple characters in the same row because, in my opinion, it just devalues the strength of said characters, and it just makes it like kind of obsolete. But in my opinion, a character like Celeste is probably like one of the only characters that fits into that role. You could argue with McGinnis, but I would argue against you in saying if it was the McGinnis when she was first buffed, then I 100% agree she was in the S+ character. But now because she got a slight nerf, she does a little bit less damage. See, she isn't essentially at that super high apex as where she originally was. So that's probably where I'm thinking for in terms of Celeste and McGinnis. So some other things that I want to note is I still think Doorman sits on the S tier, even with the slight changes. That is certain. I think character like Billy still sits in S tier because of how strong he is. Despite getting a slight nerf and change to him, it's basically the Rising Ram tier 3 change from on impact deals 7% max health. On hero, it's plus 10% max HP. So if you go in with Rising Ram, you just get a ton more HP. So you're even more tanky than what you used to be. So now you have a character that does a ton of damage, regardless of some of the changes, and is super tanky now, even more tanky than what he used to be. So he's just a tank on steroids. So I think the character still, relatively sits in the same exact realm. You also have Mirage. Mirage didn't receive any nerfs. Of course, a couple patches ago, they slightly tweaked around with his Tornado, right, and his Scarabs, but I don't think it changes the reasoning as to why this character is so strong. This character is mainly strong because he is a macro merchant. And I mean that because he literally goes around TPing, fixing your macro. So essentially, if you have a Mirage on your team, you, in a sense, should never be split pushed on, and you should never really be dropping a walker for quite a while, because Mirage is there to inherently fix everything. Fix your mistakes and fix your bad macro. So he still remains towards the S tier. In terms of a character like Pocket, Pocket still remains, I would say, in the same area. I still think is very strong in that regard, and I don't think there's a lot to change around with him. If we go down to the A tier, I think Infernus, in my opinion, has dropped quite a bit, mainly because of the character like McGinnis and a character like Celeste being so rampant right now. Megatus' Medicinal Spectre essentially negates everything Afterburn does, and because of the prevalence of this character being picked so much, I think if we do a left to right power ranking, this character drops quite significantly in that regard. Then continuing on, I think Apollo is a character that shoots up because of the recent changes they did to him. When you look at these changes, you see that the riposte melee resist reduction increased from -22 to -25. Tier 2 changed from -30% lifesteal, or melee resist, sorry, to -25% melee resist, and a plus 0.4 second stun duration. So this inherently brings back the melee build to this character because of this change here, because he gets a stun. Repulse tier 3 increased from 60% lifesteal for 7 to 75 lifesteal for 13 seconds. Again, they just keep buffing this character, even though they slightly nerfed him with the repulse change originally, changing it from not being able to proc off anything and being able to select a target, which I think is actually a little bit better. They never changed his actual damage output, except for, I guess, originally when he got released, it was like 120 something damage with disengaging sigil, and I moved to like 100. Again, nothing crazy, but now you just max flawless advance and max ult and go from there. It's basically because this character is just a snowball character, and because of the meta right now is a tempo meta where you're running around getting kills, using those kills to push objectives, buy, and so forth. Apollo fits pretty well into that tempo meta. So in my opinion, this character easily moves along the list and moves towards the top of A. You could argue for S tier, which is perfectly fine, but that's probably where I'm sitting for that. I think for the most part, it's relatively similar. You could debate putting Lash at the top of A and putting it in between S. Like I said, I don't like putting a ton of characters into the S category, because in my opinion, it kind of just shuts down the whole category in the sense of that. I don't know how to explain. I feel like if I have too many characters in the S, it doesn't make sense to me when I make tier lists. But I would put, Lash towards the top of A. You could argue for S, that's perfectly fine. If I wanted to, I would put him S. But like I said, if I put too many characters in S, it just kind of ruins that whole role essentially, or it ruins the whole tier in my eyes. I don't know, I'm kind of weird with that. When we look at some other characters, right? You have Geist, relatively in the same power ranking, Calico, Infernus, Ven, Holiday. They're all relatively in the same order. But I actually would drop Holiday down, and I would move Bebop up a tier, honestly. I would also move Dynamo up to A, because I think Dynamo right now is very good, because like I said, with the matchmaking update, you can now pick characters and swap characters before. So I think characters like Sinclair and Dynamo scale a lot better now, because you're able to understand what you're playing against and get inherently a whole lot more value by picking these two characters, because you know what you're playing against, you know what to look out for, and if the matchup is unfavorable, you can just swap off of them. So I think these two characters are essentially outliers to where they could be suited anywhere in the tier list, and I think they'd be still in the same spot, because I think it's all about the relevancy of who is in your game in that sense. If, of course, if that makes sense. Okay, moving along, I'm going to be moving Yamato up. I think moving a character like Holiday down is fine, mainly because you just have better pick characters right now that do Holiday's job just a little bit better. You have like a Paradox, you have Bebop, you have a Drifter, you have this, you have that, all in a sense characters that do, your job a little bit better. So like I said, I moved Yamato up. C tier. I think C tier is fine. And I will actually make another roll. It'll be the F roll. And I think Rave sits here. Now, like I said, every single character in this game is playable. Every single character in this game can be super strong if they're fed. It's just a character like Graves is very hard to get ahead, because you just get punished by every single character in this game. Every single character, for the most part, outranges you unless they're like a super close damage character, and like in Abrams or in Billy. And even in that, Graves is like a 50-50 sometimes. You just have so many characters that just are able to put a lot more pressure on Graves than Graves can put pressure onto. So this is why she's essentially so far below, in my regard. I think characters like Kelvin and Paige need a little bit more time because there was some changes with them. They slightly buffed Paige, and a couple patches ago before the matchmaking, they also buffed Kelvin to where his cooldown for his ultimate was reduced by 10 seconds, which can be pretty good, but I just don't think there's enough data of people playing Kelvin to inherently know the character. I think there's a lot of cool setups you can do with having, certain pick characters playing with a Kelvin, to where you use the pick character like a Paradox or a Holiday, lasso or swap them into Kelvin domes them, and you get guaranteed kills. I think there's a lot of, room and change for that. Another character I think systematically goes up is actually going to be Ivy, and I think Ivy is going to be sitting right next to Apollo. I think Ivy is very good right now, again, mainly because of the idea of the tempo meta. You're running around getting kills, using those kills to get towers, using those kills to, get different objectives around the map, getting those kills to be able to buy items to lead you to more kills, and a character that has a global ultimate pretty much, on a relatively low cooldown, allows that tempo opportunity to continuously go out throughout the entirety of the game. You use your ult, fly around the map, find a pick, jump on somebody with a couple of other teammates, get the kill, get out, and then you just keep repeating that cycle. That's why Ivy's in a pretty good spot, again, because of the, what the meta essentially is. You could move, Drifter up a little bit. I think Spirit Drifter is still pretty good. I think Abrams is in a relatively healthy spot. I think a lot of the changes to some of the other characters make him a little bit better. Because of a character like McGinnis being so prevalent, you have a wall, and you can combo the wall with, things like Abrams Charge. You have a Bebop hook that you can wall. You have all these opportunities for combos. I still think, Silver, although in my opinion is super strong, mainly because of what the character's kit has. She has a built-in disarm. She has a built-in ability to go from 0 HP to full HP, or 80% HP. The character inherently is strong or broken because of what she has. She doesn't need to buy a disarm. It's essentially like Moan Krill in the sense like he doesn't need to buy a disarming hex or anything because he has it built into his kit, which systematically means he's saving gold because that's not an item you have to buy anymore. I think Shiv is in a really bad spot right now, mainly because there's this better characters that do his job a little bit better of being like a frontline hybrid spirit nuker mix that goes into the enemy's backline, deals damage and gets out. You have a character like Apollo for that, or you have a character like Drifter for that. You have a character, like a Bebop or something. You have those characters that inherently do his job a little bit better. Yes, it might not be on the same, fundamental level, but it is in a sense in that regard. I put 7 a little bit lower, mainly because, again, it's a tempo meta. This character needs to farm, so it's really punishing for this character. Same with Viper, because everybody's moving around so much, it's a little bit harder for Viper to get around, because there's so many catch characters very viable right now that inherently just shut Viper down. Same with Hayes. Hayes is not in the best spot. Same with Paige. She, gets chased down, ran down by a majority of the characters, and she just instantly explodes. Warden is in that same regard, unless you're building Spirit Warden for the most part. His gun isn't as strong what it used to be originally, but that's why he's down a couple tiers. For the most part, this is the updated tier list, or my personal updated tier list of my thinking. Like I said, most characters, or pretty much every single character in the game, is viable in some regard. If you farm right, you build your items right, the character can easily carry a match. There is just certain characters that do that job a little bit better. I do also want to move Wraith up quite a lot, because I think Wraith is very good as well. Because even though they slightly nerfed her when you look at this, Card Trick Heart Heal Spirit Scaling was reduced, and the full auto tier 3 Spirit Scaling was reduced from 0.06 to 0.045. The reason why she's so strong is because you have the entire team running around as a tempo, and you can just sit on the side lane and farm, or you can play with the tempo and do a tempo build with Wraith. But the thing is, they also fix her club card, which actually slows properly now, allowing her to get a lot more, use out of it. And I would even arguably put her over here. If I was doing like a proper power ranking, I would even put her over here. But yeah, that is, the updated tier list for, was this the 19th of August? Like I said, in a couple days, maybe tomorrow, maybe the weekend, who knows? This character, or, the characters could completely get overhauled and everything changed. But this is what I'm thinking as of right now. You can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like always, if you haven't done so, maybe check out the channel, see any of the content. If you have your own questions, concerns, or anything like that, let me know in the comments down below. I've also started doing coaching again, specifically for Deadlock. If you want any of that information, definitely join my Discord and shoot me a DM from there. But anyways, I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.